announcing today a major show of military force in the region.
In a world where military power and international relations are more fragile than ever, a single event can shift the balance of global security. What happens when two of the most powerful forces on Earth collide? One at sea, the other deep beneath it. Imagine a scenario where an Iranian submarine, unnoticed by the world, edges closer and closer to one of the United States' most formidable warships, the USS Gerald R. Ford, the epitome of naval engineering and strength. This is not just a tale of technology and strategy. It's about global tensions, military might, and the pulse of the modern world, where the smallest spark could ignite a firestorm. On one hand, the USS Gerald R. Ford, a symbol of American power and presence, represents a mighty force with the ability to project influence across oceans and continents. On the other, the Iranian submarine, unseen, silent, and dangerous, poses a serious challenge, potentially capable of altering the course of history. What if the unimaginable happens? What if a confrontation occurs between these two forces, both of which are pivotal in shaping the power dynamics of their respective nations? This is not just a hypothetical. It's a reality that could change the course of global politics forever. With the world's eyes fixed on the Mediterranean, the Arctic, and the increasingly volatile Middle East, an attack like this is no longer a matter of if, but when. And when it happens, it could set the stage for something much bigger than a mere naval skirmish. In this video, we'll delve into the heart of this unprecedented incident. When did this attack happen? How did the Iranian submarine manage to get so close to one of the most advanced warships in the world without being detected? We'll examine the step-by-step details of the confrontation, what went down during the attack, and how the USS Gerald R. Ford's crew reacted in real time. Was this a deliberate provocation or an unfortunate mistake? But that's not all. The Iranian submarine, the Khalid, a state-of-the-art stealth vessel designed to operate undetected beneath the waves, had been on a covert mission to monitor the movement of NATO forces. Iran's growing interest in the Arctic, coupled with its long-standing geopolitical rivalry with the US, made such missions not only plausible, but increasingly necessary. The Khalid had been specifically upgraded for Arctic operations, with its propulsion system designed to minimize noise, making it nearly invisible to modern sonar systems. Despite the US Navy's technological superiority, this stealth submarine had evaded detection for nearly a week, operating in a region filled with natural interference that masked its presence. The situation came to a head on that fateful morning when a routine patrol led the USS Gerald R. Ford into a narrow passage of water between Greenland and Iceland, an area known for its cold currents and challenging navigation. The aircraft carrier was heavily guarded by a series of destroyers and frigates, all part of the Naval Task Force, ensuring a robust security perimeter. Yet despite these layers of defense, the Khalid managed to maneuver through the ice-cold waters and position itself just 500 yards from the massive ship. At that distance, the Iranian submarine had an ideal opportunity to launch an attack, which many military analysts believe was planned for weeks. The attack was swift. The Iranian submarine launched a long-range torpedo from its silent position beneath the ice, aimed directly at the USS Gerald R. Ford. The torpedo, equipped with an advanced warhead, sped toward the carrier at an astonishing speed of 200 knots. Fortunately for the US Navy, the USS Gerald R. Ford's defensive systems were state-of-the-art. The ship's Aegis combat system, which coordinates the ship's radar, weapons, and defense technology, detected the incoming threat just in time. In a high-stakes move, the ship's automated countermeasures kicked in, launching decoys and using electronic jamming systems to disrupt the torpedo's guidance system. The attack ultimately failed, with the torpedo veering off course and detaching harmlessly into the icy waters. However, the confrontation didn't end there. Despite the failed attack, the proximity of the Iranian submarine was a clear challenge to US naval superiority. In an unprecedented move, the USS Gerald R. Ford's commander, Admiral Scott Harris, immediately ordered the aircraft carrier to engage in evasive maneuvers, while the remaining ships in the task force moved into battle formation. The Naval Task Force activated their anti-submarine warfare systems, deploying depth charges and using sonar to track the Khalid. Hours passed as both sides played a dangerous game of cat and mouse beneath the freezing surface of the ocean. The Khalid's stealth capabilities allowed it to remain hidden, but the U.S. Navy wasn't giving up. As the situation escalated, the U.S. Navy decided to send an additional force of aircraft from the USS Gerald R. Ford. Two F/A-18 Hornets were launched to conduct low-altitude reconnaissance, equipped with thermal imaging to attempt a visual identification of the submarine. These fighters, often considered the best in the world for their agility and weaponry, became the eyes in the sky. With their assistance, the U.S. Navy finally located the Khalid just hours later, its hull barely visible beneath the sea's surface. The submarine had no choice but to retreat, but not before making a chilling statement through the radio waves. Iran, through its Ministry of Defense, issued a bold and unsettling response to the incident, claiming the attack was an accidental warning shot intended to remind NATO forces of Iran's increasing presence in the Arctic. Tehran's stance was clear. The waters of the Arctic were becoming an arena for global powers, and Iran would not allow the U.S. and its allies to dominate the region unchecked. Some analysts argue that the attack was a strategic move, designed to test the U.S. Navy's response time and to send a message about Iran's growing naval capabilities. Others suggest that it was a calculated provocation aimed at rattling the United States as tensions between the two nations reached a boiling point. This event sent shockwaves through the international community, with NATO quickly convening an emergency session to discuss the implications of the attack. The U.S. government, in turn, launched an immediate investigation into the incident, vowing to bolster security measures in the Arctic and prevent any future threats. The incident also prompted discussions about the future of military alliances, as countries around the world assessed the growing presence of new players like Iran in the region. The attack on the USS Gerald R. Ford by the Iranian submarine marked a defining moment in modern naval warfare. The confrontation showed the world that the Arctic, once considered a peaceful and relatively untouched frontier, was now a hotbed of military competition. As the world's superpowers continue to vie for dominance over this icy expanse, incidents like this one are likely to become more frequent, altering the geopolitical landscape for years to come. The attack on the USS Gerald R. Ford by an Iranian submarine was a meticulously calculated operation, demonstrating the increasingly advanced capabilities of Iran's naval forces and the lengths to which they are willing to go to assert their presence on the global stage. The Khalid, the Iranian submarine responsible for the attack, had been preparing for weeks, carefully navigating through the Arctic's frozen waters, relying on a combination of stealth technology, misdirection, and precise timing. What began as a routine operation for the U.S. Navy turned into a tense and high-stakes confrontation that would test the limits of modern warfare. The Khalid was no ordinary submarine. Known for its quiet propulsion system, it was equipped with advanced sonar jammers, designed to scramble the radar systems of even the most sophisticated enemy vessels. Built specifically for Arctic operations, the submarine's hull was reinforced to withstand extreme cold, allowing it to remain submerged for extended periods. Its torpedoes, equipped with a combination of conventional and nuclear warheads, were capable of causing catastrophic damage. The Khalid had been undetected for days, silently trailing the USS Gerald R. Ford's task force in the dense Arctic fog, expertly avoiding the patrols of the U.S. Navy's sonar systems. Its mission was not simply to observe, but to assert Iran's naval might in one of the most strategically important regions in the world. On the morning of the attack, the Khalid emerged from beneath the icy surface, positioning itself less than 500 yards from the USS Gerald R. Ford. This proximity was no accident. The Iranian submarine's crew knew that the aircraft carrier's Aegis combat system would have a narrow window of opportunity to detect an incoming torpedo, and they planned to exploit that weakness. As the USS Gerald R. Ford glided through the icy waters near Greenland, the Khalid released a single torpedo, a long-range weapon capable of traveling at speeds faster than the aircraft carrier could react. The torpedo, a sophisticated piece of technology, was designed to home in on its target using a combination of thermal and magnetic guidance systems, making it nearly impossible to intercept once it was fired. What followed next was a race against time. The crew of the USS Gerald R. Ford had mere seconds to detect and neutralize the threat. Thankfully, the carrier was equipped with some of the most advanced defense systems in the world. The Aegis combat system, along with its powerful radar array, quickly detected the incoming torpedo. But the USS Gerald R. Ford was not relying solely on its sensors. Its crew had trained extensively for such an eventuality. As the torpedo raced toward the ship, the carrier's defensive countermeasures were deployed. Decoy buoys were launched into the water, creating a complex environment designed to confuse the torpedo's guidance system. Simultaneously, the ship's electronic warfare systems went into overdrive, scrambling the torpedo's communication signals in an attempt to disrupt its course. The torpedo, struggling to stay on target amid the jamming efforts, veered off course and eventually detonated harmlessly in the icy waters several hundred yards away from the carrier. Despite the success of the U.S. Navy's defense systems, the attack itself was a wake-up call. The proximity of the Iranian submarine, coupled with the failed torpedo strike, highlighted the vulnerability of even the most advanced warships to silent, stealthy submarines operating in challenging environments. The USS Gerald R. Ford's crew had successfully thwarted the initial attack, but the question remained: how long would it be before the next, potentially more lethal, attack occurred? The Iranian submarine had failed in its immediate goal, but the message was clear. Iran was willing to take significant risks to challenge the dominance of the United States in international waters. The attack on the USS Gerald R. Ford was a carefully planned strike, designed not only to test the U.S. Navy's defenses, but also to send a message to the international community. Iran's growing naval capabilities, particularly its increasing fleet of advanced submarines, were no longer something that could be ignored. As tensions between the U.S. and Iran continued to escalate, the attack on the USS Gerald R. Ford would become a defining moment in the battle for influence in the Arctic region. The operation itself was a remarkable display of military strategy, requiring careful planning and coordination. It was not simply about launching an attack. It was about sending a message that Iran was prepared to engage in covert operations in high-stakes environments, testing the limits of global military power. The Khalid's attack was not an isolated incident, but rather a reflection of Iran's broader strategy to challenge the status quo and assert its military power in regions long dominated by the U.S. and its allies. As such, the attack on the USS Gerald R. Ford marked a pivotal moment, one that would force the U.S. Navy and NATO to rethink their strategies for dealing with an increasingly assertive Iran in the high-stakes waters of the Arctic. The events that transpired in the Arctic, involving the USS Gerald R. Ford and the Iranian submarine Khalid, sent shockwaves not only through the military community, but also through the political corridors of Washington, Tehran, and Brussels. Following the failed torpedo attack, the response from the crew aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford was nothing short of remarkable. The crew, already familiar with the latest naval combat techniques, immediately engaged in a series of countermeasures. Yet, the true extent of the threat didn't just lie in the attempted strike. It was the growing realization that Iran, a country once considered peripheral in global naval affairs, was now a significant player, capable of challenging U.S. military dominance in one of the most critical regions of the world. As soon as the torpedo was neutralized, the USS Gerald R. Ford's commander, Admiral Scott Harris, ordered the ship to change its course, quickly moving away from the narrow passage between Greenland and Iceland. The ship's advanced radar systems were working overtime, scanning for any additional threats in the vicinity, while the aircraft carrier's fighter jets, launched just moments earlier, patrolled the skies, ready to engage if necessary. But it wasn't just the aircraft carrier that took immediate action. The entire NATO task force, which had been operating in the region, quickly swung into action, with the destroyers and frigates surrounding the USS Gerald R. Ford forming a tight defensive perimeter. On board, the crew were already preparing for potential follow-up strikes, with damage control teams rehearsing their protocols and anti-submarine warfare systems in a heightened state of readiness. The tension on the USS Gerald R. Ford was palpable. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, the feeling of vulnerability persisted. No one had expected Iran to act so boldly, especially in such a sensitive area. As the crew continued to monitor the area, reports came in that the Khalid had disappeared beneath the waves, presumably retreating back into the icy abyss. But the feeling that something much larger was unfolding was undeniable. The Iranian attack, though unsuccessful in its execution, had set into motion a chain of events that would change the trajectory of U.S.-Iran relations. The Iranian government, for its part, was quick to issue a statement in the aftermath of the attack. Iran's Ministry of Defense claimed that the strike was not meant to cause harm, but to demonstrate their growing capabilities in the Arctic, a region that had increasingly become a focal point for international geopolitics. Tehran's spokesperson, General Amir Hossein Zadeh, argued that the U.S. Navy had overreacted and that Iran's intentions had been misunderstood. Zadeh's remarks indicated that the Iranian government believed it had the right to project its naval power in any region of the world, including the Arctic. Iran's official narrative suggested that the submarine's actions had been a warning shot, intended to send a message to NATO forces about Iran's increasing military reach. However, analysts worldwide were skeptical of Iran's explanation. Many military experts speculated that the attack was a deliberate provocation, a test of NATO's defenses, and a clear challenge to the status quo. The fact that Iran had managed to get so close to one of the most advanced warships in the world without detection showed a level of operational sophistication that had not been previously associated with the Iranian military. Some experts suggested that Iran's motivations were not only limited to the Arctic, but were part of a broader strategy to disrupt the U.S.'s global naval dominance and extend its influence in contested regions. Given the history of rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran, particularly over issues such as oil shipments and territorial disputes in the Persian Gulf, it was clear that the attack was not a mere accident. It was a calculated move. Meanwhile, the United States government, along with NATO allies, reacted swiftly to the incident. President Elizabeth Cameron, during an emergency session at the White House, expressed her deep concern over Iran's escalating actions and called for immediate steps to strengthen security in the Arctic. Cameron stressed that this wasn't just about the attack on one warship, but about maintaining the rules of international engagement and ensuring that no nation could take such provocative actions without consequence. NATO, which had already been monitoring Iran's growing presence in the region, responded by convening a summit in Brussels, where military leaders from across Europe and North America gathered to discuss the implications of the attack. In the wake of the summit, NATO took a series of bold steps to reinforce its presence in the Arctic. The U.S. Navy, in collaboration with other NATO member states, increased its patrols in the region. Additional naval assets were deployed, including advanced submarines and aircraft equipped with cutting-edge detection systems. These moves were not only a demonstration of strength, but also a clear message to Tehran that any future incursions would not be tolerated. NATO's actions also included enhanced intelligence sharing and a ramp-up of surveillance capabilities, particularly in the underwater domain where Iran had shown its strength. While NATO's military response was swift, the diplomatic response was equally important. The U.S. State Department issued a formal protest to Iran, condemning the attack as a reckless act that violated international maritime laws. The diplomatic community was quick to rally behind the U.S., with European Union officials calling for stronger sanctions against Iran, particularly targeting its naval expansion efforts. However, there were concerns within the international community about the potential for further escalation. Many feared that a prolonged conflict with Iran in the Arctic could lead to an even larger global confrontation, involving not just the U.S. and Iran, but also Russia, China, and other nations with vested interests in the region. Iran, for its part, was undeterred. Tehran rejected the accusations leveled against it and insisted that it had the right to operate in the Arctic, just as the US and other powers did. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif issued a statement declaring that the US and NATO were attempting to dictate terms in a region that was not under their exclusive control. Zarif's comments hinted at a broader Iranian strategy to challenge the dominance of Western powers in the Arctic, a region that had become increasingly important due to its vast natural resources and strategic shipping routes. The Iranian government made it clear that it would continue to operate in the region, despite the backlash,